I was still wearing my work coveralls when Marla Kent handed me the envelope. Didn't even give me time to wash the grease off my hands. The conference room was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. She stood there in her perfect suit, VP of Aerospace Integration, smiling like someone delivering good news instead of destroying a life. "Stetson, we're restructuring," she said smoothly. "Your methods no longer align with our culture of innovation. Effective immediately, we're letting you go." Across the table sat my own team, the engineers I'd trained for years. Jenkins, who still asked me to check his calculations every week. Foster, who'd nearly crashed a test launch until I caught his thermal loop error. Not one of them looked at me. Not one spoke up. "We're calling it early retirement," Marla continued, sliding papers toward me. "Very generous package. But we need your badge and access codes today." She called it retirement. I called it what it was, betrayal wrapped in corporate language. 38 years of service and they couldn't even let me finish my shift with dignity. I didn't argue. Didn't beg. Just stood up slowly, my 61-year-old knees protesting after a morning spent under the Alatheus engine housing. I walked past the wall of framed photographs, launches I'd engineered, systems I'd designed, problems I'd solved when everyone else had given up. The Alethea. My ship. The deep space cargo vessel I'd spent 5 years perfecting. Its photograph hung largest in the hallway, gleaming white against the darkness of space. Underneath was a brass plaque listing the engineering team. My name had been scraped off. Fresh scratches marked where Stetson Granger, lead systems engineer, used to be. The final humiliation came at the main entrance. Security made me surrender my badge in front of a group of interns, kids fresh out of college who'd probably never even held a wrench. One of them whispered to another. They laughed. Marla watched from her office window, arms crossed, making sure I left without causing a scene. I looked back once, hoping someone, anyone, would meet my eyes. Nobody did. My name is Stetson Granger. 61 years old, though most days my back feels 80. I grew up in a garage in rural Pennsylvania, fixing truck engines with my father. Got a scholarship to engineering school, graduated top of my class, and spent nearly 4 decades making impossible things work. I'm not flashy. Don't use buzzwords or talk about disrupting paradigms. I just build systems that don't fail. Every ship I've touched has launched on time and come home safe. Every engine I've designed has outlasted its projected lifespan. But in the new aerospace industry, that doesn't matter. What matters is looking good in press conferences, using the right corporate language, making executives like Marla feel smart and relevant. I made her feel old, obsolete. When she proposed stripping safety redundancies to cut costs, I said no. When she wanted to rush the Alatheus launch for publicity, I said we needed more testing. When she claimed my thermal management system was outdated, I showed her the data proving otherwise. I became inconvenient. And inconvenient people don't last long. The official reason for my termination was performance concerns. Marla whispered to the board that I was resistant to new technologies, that I'd sabotage test results to make her team look bad. Complete lies, but lies wrapped in just enough corporate language to sound plausible. When the Alatheus preliminary tests came back slightly below projections, she needed a scapegoat. The aging engineer who wouldn't adapt made a perfect villain. I could have fought it. Hired lawyers, demanded arbitration, dragged out the process for months. Part of me wanted to. But another part, the part that had watched my life's work get credited to people who barely understood it, had a different idea. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's patient. Sometimes you let people make their mistakes and simply wait for reality to catch up with their arrogance. So I took their severance package, signed their non-disclosure agreement, and walked away. But I kept copies of everything. Every blueprint. Every safety protocol. Every warning I documented about the corners they were cutting. I went home and waited for the inevitable. My garage became my workshop again. The same place where I'd built my first engine at 16, where I'd stayed up all night before engineering exams, where I'd always done my best thinking. Tools lined the walls, wrenches, diagnostic computers, half-finished projects I'd never had time for during my corporate years. I poured my anger into work. Designed hybrid propulsion cores nobody had asked for. Improved emergency stabilization systems. Taught night classes at the community college for kids who couldn't afford fancy engineering schools. Meanwhile, the aerospace news cycle churned on. The Alethea 2 was announced, next generation they called it. Revolutionary design improvements. I watched the press conference from my laptop. Marla stood center stage, my former team arranged behind her like props. They showed technical specifications. I recognized every system. They were mine. My designs, my calculations, my years of refinement. Just repackaged with new names and stripped of the safety redundancies I'd insisted on. Nobody mentioned legacy contributors. Nobody footnoted the foundation they'd built on. They'd erased me and stolen my work in one efficient move. 6 months after my termination, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a USB drive and a note. Thought you should see this. Foster. Had to be. The only one on my old team with enough conscience left to feel guilty. The drive contained confidential specifications for the Alethea 2. I opened them on my secure laptop and my blood ran cold. They hadn't just reused my designs, they'd gutted them. Every safety protocol I'd built in, every redundancy I'd insisted on, stripped away to save weight and cost. The power distribution system was fundamentally flawed. If the secondary cooling pumps failed, and they would, under sustained load, the primary system would overload. The ship would lose attitude control and drift. I'd warned about this exact scenario in my final report. Marla had called it catastrophizing. She'd overruled me, confident that modern sensors would catch any problems. She was wrong. The sensors would catch it. But by then it would be too late. I printed everything, organized it chronologically, and filed it carefully. Then I waited. The launch was spectacular. Media coverage for weeks. Historic advancement in deep space commerce, the headlines read. The Alethea 2 lifted off from Kennedy Space Center on a perfect Florida morning, carrying 50 tons of cargo destined for the orbital station. Marla's face was everywhere. Interviews, magazine covers, panel discussions about the future of aerospace engineering. Her team stood behind her in every photo, looking proud. Looking like they'd accomplished something instead of just inheriting it. A new era of streamlined, efficient space travel, Marla told reporters. We've eliminated unnecessary complications and embraced modern innovation. She meant she'd eliminated my safety systems and embraced cost-cutting. But nobody asked follow-up questions. Nobody checked the engineering specs. They just filmed the ship rising on a pillar of fire and declared it a triumph. I watched from my garage, tools in hand, and started a countdown in my head. Based on the cargo weight and the flawed cooling system, I gave them 72 hours before serious problems began. I was wrong. It took 68. I saw it on the live telemetry feed, the one they broadcast publicly to show how smoothly everything was running. Bottom right corner, a small alert most people wouldn't even notice. Thermal spike in the outer ring. 0.7 degrees above normal. The mission control commentator didn't mention it. Probably didn't even see it. But I did. That spike would grow. Slowly at first, then exponentially. The secondary pumps would strain to compensate. Without the redundancies I'd designed, they'd fail. The primary system would overload. And the ship would drift, powerless, with 50 tons of cargo and a price tag in the hundreds of millions. All because Marla thought she knew better than an engineer with 38 years of experience. I could have called them. Warned them. But they'd made it clear my knowledge wasn't valued. They'd erased my name, stolen my work, and thrown me away. So I did what they'd taught me to do. I waited. Let them discover their mistake on their own. Let them panic. Let them realize that the outdated engineer they dismissed might have been right after all. The call came at 2 in the morning, 3 days after launch. Unknown number. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Is this Stetson Granger? The voice was young, shaking. Jenkins. Speaking, I said calmly, like I hadn't been waiting for this exact call. We have a situation with the Alethea 2. Thermal regulation is failing and we can't. His voice cracked. We need help. The systems aren't responding like they should. I let the silence stretch out. Let him hear the weight of what he was asking. He'd sat silent while they fired me. Now he wanted my expertise. Have you tried calling your modern innovators? I asked. The ones who streamlined everything? More silence. Then quietly, please Stetson. People's cargo is at risk. The station needs those supplies. I'm retired, Jenkins. Remember? Performance concerns. Not aligned with your culture of innovation. Stetson. I hung up. Turned off my phone. Went back to sleep. They'd have to try harder than that. Marla called 6 hours later. I turned my phone back on, curious how long her pride would let her wait. Not long apparently. Stetson. No pleasantries. No apology. Just my name said like a curse she had to speak. Marla. I matched her tone exactly. We're experiencing technical difficulties with the Alethea 2. The team thinks your insight might be valuable. Even now she couldn't admit they needed me. Just my insight. Like I was some consultant they were graciously allowing to contribute. Technical difficulties, I repeated. That's an interesting way to describe a ship losing attitude control because someone ignored safety protocols. Her breath caught. You knew this would happen. I told you it would happen. 6 months ago. In the report you dismissed as catastrophizing. We need you to come in. Now. No. Stetson, this isn't personal. Everything about this is personal, Marla. You made it personal when you erased my name. When you stole my work. When you threw me out like garbage. Her voice went cold. Name your price. Finally. The question I'd been waiting for. I didn't name a price. I named terms. Non-negotiable. In writing. Signed by the board. Full reinstatement of my engineering title. Public credit for the original Alethea design. Complete authority over the rescue operation. No interference from Marla or her team. And my name back on every plaque, every document, every piece of work they tried to erase. They had 12 hours to decide. After that, I'd turn off my phone and go fishing. Marla tried to negotiate. I hung up. The board called 4 hours later. They agreed to everything. Sent the contracts electronically. I read every word, found their one attempt to limit my authority, crossed it out and sent it back. They signed anyway. I'd won before even stepping back into the building. By dawn I was dressed and ready. Not in coveralls this time, in slacks and a button-down shirt, like I was attending a funeral. In a way I was. The funeral of their arrogance. Walking back through those doors felt different. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. Some people looked away ashamed. Others stared openly, trying to figure out what had happened. Security didn't ask for my badge. They already had orders to let me through. The intern from 6 months ago, the one who'd laughed, held the door open and mumbled something that might have been an apology. I ignored him. I wasn't there for apologies. Marla waited in the main engineering bay, surrounded by her team. They looked exhausted, probably been working all night trying to fix a problem they didn't understand. Jenkins had dark circles under his eyes. Foster was hunched over a terminal, typing frantically. When I entered, Foster actually stood up and started clapping. Slowly, uncertainly, like he wasn't sure if it was allowed. A few others joined in. I raised my hand. The clapping stopped. Show me the diagnostics, I said. No greeting. No small talk. Just work. Because the ship was what mattered. Not their guilt. Not my vindication. The ship. They'd set up a command center in the conference room where they'd fired me. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Large monitors displayed telemetry data, thermal readings, power distribution charts. All trending wrong. Jenkins slid a tablet toward me. We've tried everything. Rerouting power, manual override of the cooling system, emergency protocols. Did you try the thermal cascade reset? I interrupted. He blinked. The what? Section 47 of my original safety documentation. The protocol I designed specifically for this failure mode. Foster spoke up quietly. Marla told us that documentation was outdated. She said we didn't need to study it. Of course she had. I pulled up the file on my phone, I kept copies of everything, and showed them the procedure. Step-by-step instructions for exactly this scenario, written 3 years ago when I'd first identified the vulnerability. Jenkins stared at the screen like it was written in a foreign language. Why didn't you tell us about this before? I did. In 17 different reports. Marla deleted them from the archive. The room went very quiet. I spent the next 16 hours rewriting their patch code. No sleep. Coffee brought by assistants who wouldn't meet my eyes. Marla hovered at the edges, trying to look involved without actually contributing anything useful. Every command, every line of code went through me. I'd learned my lesson about letting other people improve my work. This time it would be done right or not at all. The team watched over my shoulder, finally seeing how the systems actually worked instead of the simplified version Marla had taught them. Foster took notes. Jenkins asked questions, good ones, the kind that showed he was actually thinking. Why did you design it this way? Foster asked at one point, pointing to a seemingly redundant circuit pathway. Because space doesn't care about efficiency, I said. It cares about reliability. That unnecessary complication is what keeps the ship running when everything else fails. He nodded slowly, understanding finally clicking into place. They'd been taught that simpler was better. They were learning that simpler was just simpler, not better, not safer, just cheaper. The satellite delay made everything tense. 60-second lag between sending commands and getting confirmation. We'd input the patch, then wait, staring at screens hoping it would take. The entire team crowded around the main monitor. Even people from other departments came to watch. Word had spread through the building. The old engineer was back, fixing the mess they'd made. I hit the final execute command and leaned back. Now we wait. 60 seconds. 70. 80. The room barely breathed. Then the screen flashed. Manual override accepted. Thermal cascade reset initiated. Half the room exhaled. Someone started crying. Jenkins dropped into a chair, head in his hands. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Accepting the patch was one thing. Actually stabilizing the ship was another. We watched the thermal readings. Slowly, painfully slowly, the outer ring temperature began to drop. The secondary pumps came back online. Power distribution normalized. At hour 18, the Alethea 2 sent its automated status update. All systems nominal. Only then did I stand up. It's stable. Monitor it for another 6 hours, but the crisis is over. The room erupted in applause. I walked out before they could turn me into some kind of hero. The headlines changed within minutes. Social media exploded. News channels updated their coverage. Veteran engineer rescues multi-million-dollar mission. Stetson Granger saves Alethea 2 after controversial dismissal. Fired engineer returns to fix company's costly mistake. My name, the one they'd scratched off plaques and deleted from archives, was suddenly everywhere. People dug up my employment history, my patents, my decades of successful launches. They found the suspicious timing of my termination, the rushed launch, the corners cut. The narrative shifted from triumph to scandal. Questions emerged. Why was Granger fired? Who made the decision? What else did they ignore? Marla's office went dark. No statements. No interviews. Just silence from the woman who'd been everywhere a week ago. The board called an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited. Didn't need to be. I'd already done what I came for. Marla tried to salvage her reputation. She issued a statement praising the collaborative effort to rescue the Alethea 2. Tried to position herself as the leader who'd made the difficult decision to bring me back. I released my termination letter. The one calling me not aligned with our culture of innovation. The one signed by her with the board's approval 6 months ago. Then I released my final engineering report. The one warning about exactly this failure. The one she'd called catastrophizing. Then the emails. Months of exchanges where I'd flagged safety concerns and been overruled. Where I'd requested more testing and been denied. Where I'd predicted this exact scenario and been dismissed as outdated. I didn't make any statements. Didn't need to. The documents spoke for themselves. Within 24 hours, major news outlets were calling it the Granger vindication. Engineering forums dissected every decision Marla had made. Industry professionals started questioning whether cost-cutting had compromised other projects. Marla's carefully constructed image crumbled. And I watched it happen from my garage, tools in hand, finally getting the recognition she tried to steal. The board ordered an internal review, standard procedure after a near failure. Everyone knew it was really an investigation into who was responsible. Marla prepared for it like she prepared for everything. Professional slides, confident tone, corporate buzzwords designed to deflect blame. The conference room was packed. Board members, senior engineers, department heads. I sat in the back, invited as a consulting expert. Really there to make sure nobody rewrote history. Marla started her presentation. The Alethea 2 represented a bold step toward streamlined aerospace design. While we encountered unexpected challenges, our rapid response demonstrated. Question, interrupted someone from the engineering side. Foster. The quiet one who'd sent me the leaked files. Marla's smile tightened. Yes. Why is Stetson Granger's signature embedded in the recovery code? The room went still. Excuse me? Marla said. Foster pulled up his laptop display on the main screen. Lines of code, my code, with my signature embedded in the comments. W.G.2019 appeared throughout the thermal management system. This isn't new code, Foster continued. This is from the original Alethea design. The system you said was outdated and removed. The lead auditor, a stern woman named Patricia Winters, leaned forward. Miss Kent, are you saying you removed these protocols? They failed exactly as Mr. Granger predicted, and then he had to reinstall them to save the mission? Marla opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. The context is more complex. The context is very simple, I said from the back. Every head turned. She cut corners to look good. Ignored warnings to seem innovative. And when reality caught up with her arrogance, she called the engineer she'd fired to fix her mess. Patricia turned to Marla. Is that accurate? Marla's corporate composure finally cracked. He was resistant to change. Holding us back from what? Patricia interrupted. From nearly losing $100 million ship? From endangering a mission? From what exactly? Marla had no answer. The room knew it. The board knew it. Most importantly, she knew it. Patricia closed her laptop. This review is concluded. Ms. Kent, you'll receive our findings within 48 hours. Marla left without looking at anyone. Her empire was crumbling, built on a foundation she'd never understood and couldn't control. The board voted 3 days later. I wasn't present, but Jenkins called me immediately after. She's out, he said. Unanimous vote. They're removing her from all project oversight, effective immediately. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication. Just tired. Who's replacing her? I asked. Patricia Winters. And Stetson, he paused. She wants you back. Full position. Lead engineer. Your name on everything. I looked around my garage. The projects I'd started, the classes I was teaching, the quiet life I'd begun building after they'd thrown me away. I'll think about it, I told him. But I already knew my answer. I'd return, but not as their employee. As a consultant. On my terms. With full authority and double my old salary. They'd erased me once. I wouldn't give them another chance. I agreed to return for one final project. Rebuilding the Alethea 2 systems properly. 6-month contract. Complete design authority. Every safety protocol I'd originally specified, reinstated and upgraded. Patricia agreed immediately. She understood that good engineering wasn't about looking innovative, it was about being reliable. I brought Foster and Jenkins onto my direct team. They'd shown conscience when it mattered. The others, the ones who'd sat silent during my termination, I worked with professionally but kept at arm's length. We spent 6 months redesigning everything Marla had stripped away. Every redundancy. Every safety margin. Every unnecessary complication that had kept my ships running for decades. When we finished, the Alethea 2 was 15% heavier and 5% more expensive to operate. It was also the most reliable ship in the fleet. I compiled everything into a master document. 300 pages of specifications, procedures, and protocols. On the first page, I included one rule in bold text. Never erase the people who built the foundation. 3 months before my contract ended, Patricia called me to her office. We're launching a new ship class, she said. Advanced cargo carriers for deep space missions. The board wants to name them after pioneering engineers. I knew where this was going. Patricia. The Granger class, she interrupted. Ships built on your principles. Reliability over flash. Safety over cost. Engineering over marketing. She showed me the preliminary designs. They'd incorporated every lesson from the Alethea disaster. Multiple redundancies. Robust thermal management. Systems designed to fail safely instead of catastrophically. Your name won't be on a plaque they can scratch off, Patricia said. It'll be on every ship we build for the next 50 years. I looked at the designs, solid, practical, built to last. Everything I'd always believed engineering should be. I accept, I said. On one condition. What's that? Foster and Jenkins get co-designer credits. They learned. They deserve recognition. Patricia smiled. Done. Marla tried to rebuild her reputation. Launched a consulting firm, wrote articles about lessons learned, appeared on panels about aerospace innovation. But the industry has a long memory. No major company hired her. Her firm folded within a year. The last I heard, she was teaching introductory engineering at a community college in Ohio, the kind of position she'd once considered beneath her. I felt no joy in her fall. Just a quiet acknowledgement that actions have consequences. She'd built her career on taking credit for others' work. Eventually, that foundation collapsed. One evening, I saw her on a YouTube panel discussion titled, Recovery from Professional Setbacks. She looked older, humbler, more aware of her limitations. I watched for 5 minutes, then closed the browser. Her story was no longer my concern. 6 months after the Alethea 2 rescue, Jenkins came to my garage. He'd been quiet since the investigation, working hard, asking good questions, slowly rebuilding his skills on a proper foundation. He brought coffee and something else, a handwritten letter. I should have said something, he told me. When they fired you. I knew it was wrong. I was just scared of losing my job too. I took the letter but didn't open it. What are you going to do differently next time? Speak up. No matter what it costs. Good. I handed him a binder, technical specifications for the Granger-class ships. Then take this, study it, teach it to the next generation. Make sure they understand that good engineering isn't about being impressive. It's about being right. He took the binder like it was sacred. Maybe it was. Every page represented lessons learned through decades of experience. Experience they'd almost thrown away because it wasn't trendy. 1 year after my termination, I walked through the shipyard one final time. My contract was ending. The Granger-class prototype was nearly complete, ready for testing. Patricia had offered me a permanent position. I declined. Some things are better finished than prolonged. The main assembly building had changed. New plaques lined the walls, proper ones engraved in steel instead of scratched brass. My name appeared on 3 of them, crediting my work on the original Alethea, the rescue operation, and the new ship class. But the best plaque was the smallest. Near the entrance at eye level, in memory of the engineers whose work built this company. May their names never be forgotten. Underneath were dozens of names. Mine. Others who'd retired or passed. The foundation on which everything else stood. I ran my fingers across the engraving. This was better than vindication. Better than revenge. This was permanence. Recognition that would outlast everyone in the building. They tried to bury me in shame, erase me from history, pretend my decades of work didn't matter. But when their ship broke down, when their arrogance met reality, they remembered my name. And now that name would stay remembered. Engraved in steel. Built into ships. Taught to students. A reminder that you can ignore good engineering but you can't escape it forever. I walked out of that building for the last time. Not in shame. Not in coveralls. But as the engineer I'd always been, proven right by the test that matters most. Reality.